Hello, this is Recovery Diaries in Depth. I'm your host, Gabe Nathan. Thanks so much for joining us. We're very happy to have you here.
We are so pleased to be welcoming to Recovery Diaries in Depth Florence Mukangenzi. She is a doctor living in Rwanda in the heart of Africa. She enjoys blogging at secretswillkillyou.wordpress.com. She also enjoys quality prayer time and long conversations. There's an essay by Florence called Playing Hide and Seek with a Demon, My Struggle with Anxiety, on our website, as well as a short documentary film we made about Florence when she was visiting the U.S. in 2019 for a women's writers' retreat.
Each week, we'll bring you a Recovery Diaries contributor, folks who have shared their mental health journey with us through essay or video format. We want to see where they are on their mental health journey since initially being published on our website. Our goal is to continue supporting our diverse community by having conversations here on our podcast to follow up and see what has shifted, what has changed, and what new things have emerged. We're so happy to have you along for this journey. We want to remind you to follow our show for new and back episodes at recoverydiaries.org. There, like the podcast, you'll find stories of mental health, empowerment, and change. You can also sign up for our mailing list there so you never miss a new podcast episode, essay, or film. And you can find this podcast pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts. We appreciate your comments and feedback about our show. It helps us improve, make changes, and grow. And of course, make sure to like, share, and subscribe.
Florence, thank you so much for being here on Recovery Diaries in Depth. It is an incredible joy to see you here.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. I'm just really excited.
So can you just tell the people listening, talk about the last time we saw each other in person? Because I actually don't have the joy and the privilege of seeing a lot of the Recovery Diaries contributors, especially from people who live in Rwanda, where you do. Most of the time, I'm communicating with authors via email, and we're editing essays back and forth, and the essay's published, and that's it. But I had the opportunity to spend some time with you 6 years ago. Can you just talk about that?
Yeah, so last time we saw each other was in 2019, right before the pandemic, at the OC 87 Women's Retreat. And it was, exciting and overwhelming to say the least, because, just there's me making all this trip all the way from East Africa to the US and, attending this retreat, and it was all like a dream. And also from just receiving that email of you inviting me to the US and me being like, oh, is this real? And for it to like really happen, so just a very dreamlike time.
And it was for me too. And I just want to say that from, getting to know you when your essay was first published, which was a couple years before the Women's Writers Retreat, and then the Writers Retreat happening, and in 2019, and now here we are in 2025, getting to talk on this podcast, it really drives home for me how extraordinary life is, and about how I feel like this kind of thing, this is going to sound like I'm kind of tooting our own horn or Recovery Diaries' own horn, but like I feel like other publications, they get an essay and they publish it and then they move on to the next one, and it's just about producing content and just getting essays out there or getting writing out there. And here it's relationships. it doesn't happen with everyone. It doesn't happen with every single contributor. And I understand and acknowledge that. But when I look at you and I see the thread of the human relationship, from SA to the retreat to now to just maintaining this connection, it's extraordinary. And you never know what can happen when you write an essay and send it to a publication. It's sometimes it's just way more than getting published.
Yeah. So I don't know. To me, just like you said, I thought I was, gonna publish it and then, was gonna be over and stuff. And that happened. But then after that, 2 years after that, like you get in touch with me again and you're like, okay, we're doing this retreat. Would you want to come? And then that happened. And now, 6 years after that, we're doing this podcast. And I think one of the things I feel that cements is that, so there is this story of, you tell your story about, mental health and, things you've learned and your journey. And there is, I don't know if I would say like humanity that comes with, following up to the story instead of assuming that, this person just, then, rode off in the sunset and then, lived happily ever after and stuff. And to keep in touch with writers and hearing from them, wondering what happened to that story, is what makes the experience really unique, and really valuable in such a way that I feel the people at OC87 are really kind of like recognizing all these contributors as, this person with a story and, really putting value into that.
It means a lot to me that you think that and believe that, because it's like the guiding light of what we do. I think it's one of the reasons why I hate the word content. It makes me want to puke when I hear someone say about a piece of writing, about a personal essay by someone who has lived experience with mental health. Oh, what's your content for the week? Fuck that. It's not content. This isn't like, we're not posting memes or just like meaningless shit. These are people. These are human beings who are putting themselves out there in this incredibly vulnerable way, naked, really standing naked before the world and saying, this is who I am. And this is my story, or a part of my story and my journey. And it's been really hard. And I think all of our contributors open themselves up to ridicule by mean, nasty people, criticism, people who doubt them, people who fault them, people who say, well, such and such happened because you're weak, or it's your fault, or you weren't, whatever enough to overcome what you're dealing with. And we'll get to, thoughts about mental health in Rwanda and maybe some stigmatizing ideas that people have about mental health. But we feel so strongly here about people, and that's what we're doing here, is sharing human beings with others. And the thing that you said about checking in, so I used to work at a psychiatric hospital, and I think that one of the most valuable things that you can do, like post-discharge, patients, they're hospitalized for 5 days or 7 days or 9 days or whatever it is, and they're discharged, you check in with them. You send a postcard. You pick up the phone and call. Hey, how are you doing? Hey, I know it's been 3 weeks since you were last in the hospital. What's been happening? Because more often than not, it ain't just riding off into the sunset and la 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 and everything's great, right? Life is like this. And it's so important to be there for people when it's going down, right? And if you never check in with them, you never know. And the other people think, well, they don't care about me. We just had this transactional relationship. I was in the hospital and now I'm not. So they're not thinking about me. Or I wrote the essay and it was published and then they're on to the next one. And that's not right. We want to be with you guys as much as we can. And that's the whole point of doing this podcast, is we wanted a vehicle to bring people back, so we can check in with them and know what's been going on. So what's been going on, Flo? What's been going on since 2019? Spill it. Spill the tea.
So what's been going on? Where does one start? So in 2019, I was in medical school. I don't even remember what year I was in. And
like
then
second?
Yeah, like a second year. And then there were issues with my school, and then there was the pandemic, and my, graduation was delayed by years. So I ended up going back to medical school, and in 2023 I graduated. And
cheers, doctor.
Yeah, cheers to that. It's very surreal, and sometimes I have a hard time calling myself a doctor, because I'm like, what, you mean
well,
me?
Well, you better get used to
it. Yeah, like, you mean me who can, make a decision about what shoes to wear in the morning? Now I have to make a decision about people's lives. Yeah, so that happened. And then I did a year of medical internship, which I was working in a hospital for a year. And then in July of last year, I decided to take a break. And so I've been on that break. It's going to be in 3 months it'll be a year of me not working, and me just hanging out. And a lot of things led to that. But another thing that was significant that happened is that shortly before that year ended, I started a ketamine treatment, which my therapist, who is an American woman who has been living in Rwanda for several years, started this clinic, which was in the making for several years. She would talk about it, and it sounded like it was never gonna happen, and she had to jump through several hoops, and then she successfully started this ketamine clinic here, and it's in May it will have been operating for a whole year. So that's an experience all of its own. So those are, I think, the most significant things that have happened in my life since then. And now, I've taken this year to kind of calm down, reevaluate my life, figure out what I want to do, if I want to go to residency, if I want to do a master's in this or that. Yeah, so that's where I've been at.
That is a lot. And I have so many questions, but I think the first question that I have is about the ketamine treatment. Do you find it helpful? Can you talk a little bit about it? And were you anxious about trying it at first? And how have you been feeling?
So for me, it couldn't come like this. The clinic couldn't start fast enough. Because it's very funny where I started with medication, where I started being very reluctant about trying different medications and stuff, and getting to the point of being like, if something is going to help, I'm willing to try anything. And so through the years, I went through this history of really trying almost everything that was available at the market here in Rwanda, and also getting to a point where I was also even like getting medication that wasn't available in Rwanda, like getting medication shipped from like Europe or the US. And so I tried a lot of different things, and I would have some work, imperfectly, some work, and then stop working after a while. I would have some that would not work right away. And so I had this experience of, continuing to be very depressed. And even when I felt like anxiety was controlled, it was this thing of like, just working on two things. Sometimes anxiety is controlled, but then depression is there. Oh, sometimes depression is better, but then I'm very, very anxious. And so we tried all these things, and my therapist had experience had clients who had good results with ketamine. And she would, talk to me about it and stuff. And because she was someone who I've worked with for several years, who knew me very well, and who knew also the history of how I would change medication, go back to it, try something new, and how my body would react to that. And so I was very anxious to try it. I was very eager. I was like, if this is something that could help me, even if it was, for a while, like I'm very willing to try it. So I think I was probably like at the first infusion, I was a bit anxious, but leading up to it, I was very just excited to being like, this is something that could help me significantly. And I'm trying to remember if you asked me also about if, like, if it works, if it has helped me. And so it's been a year, and I think going into it, I was like, this is not like antidepressant. This is going to fix me like right away. And, boy, was I wrong because it ended up being a journey. And I got more help when I when I kind of like changed my mind and like committed to it in a way where I was recognizing that, this is a journey. This is something that's helping my brain, but also working hand in hand with my willingness to continue to take care of myself, every day and to work on things. And so this, very dramatic change that I wanted after like at least the first 6 infusions. It wasn't like that, but along the journey, because it's been almost a year now, is when I see how how things have changed in my life, and also with working with my therapist, where sometimes we sort of just go through things and just realize how that I have made leaps in terms of, how my brain works, how it perceives things. Yeah.
I love that you made the point about how, we want this thing, whether it's a ketamine infusion or whether it's an SSRI or whatever the pharmacological intervention, to just fix it and to have it kick in. And there's so much more to maintaining your mental health and recovery than just taking a thing, right? Putting some kind of substance in your body. And it's work. It's always so much work that you have to do in therapy, out of therapy, dealing with cognitive distortions, dealing with perceptions of, oh, other people are thinking this about me, or I'm thinking this about me, or I'm bad, or I'm a lazy piece of shit, or I'm whatever the narrative is in our minds. It's so much work to constantly be challenging that and to be committing to being better, or committing to challenging those thoughts, or committing to changing behaviors that are no longer helpful or no longer serving you. It's a lot. And so my question is, like, how are you doing all of that, or trying to do all of that, while like taking care of patients, taking care of other human beings? How are you keeping that train on the track of also taking care of flow at the same time?
Yeah. So I started, like I was always, taking some sort of antidepressant. And even before I graduated, and especially during the last years of medical school, a lot of it is just really hospital work. And so I was always taking some sort of, antidepressant stuff to help my mental health, so that I can, show up as, as best as I can. And one of the ways that that I was able to like take care of myself, and like also be there for patients and stuff. I think one of the reasons why it became probably like easy is how first of all, like I'm taking all this medication to like help myself, but also how affirming it is to do great things, to see myself helping people. There's this thing that happened in the hospital where you may, see a patient at first and they're like really sick. And then maybe you go home on the weekend and the one on the weekend shift, and then you come back on Monday and you can recognize them because they've just so healed so much. Their faces changed. Everything is changing. Like, okay, is this the same person? Especially in kids. I've seen that, especially in kids where, person just really changes. And it's just really affirming that, something like that happens and that you can see yourself doing that. And it challenges this, belief that mental health issues put you on, of really convincing you that you're useless, that you're useless, you don't have that much strength physically or otherwise. And I felt like it was I was helping myself. And at the same time, the work I was doing was also helping me by affirming me, by reminding me that I can do hard things, that I can do great things. So I was able to recognize that the patients that I'm helping, sometimes they're just dealing with depression or anxiety in their own way, especially in a community like ours, where they're not even doing what I was doing for myself, like taking medication. And I don't know, I feel like I've spoken in circles about this, but I feel like there was a really big affirming part of my work, that it was like I was taking care of myself, but also my job was sort of, taking care of me.
And that's a really extraordinary gift. And I think there are healthcare providers, particularly during COVID, who, their mental health took such a hard hit, and, they were being run ragged and saying, God, I'm running around helping everyone else, but my tank is completely empty. And what I'm hearing from you, and I think it's so extraordinary, is that through the work that you were doing, your tank was getting filled by the work that you were doing, from seeing those changes happening in patients and seeing people who you could identify with, who are going through similar things that you're going through. And it's just, it's really moving to hear. And, I know you don't need to hear it from anyone else, but I'll tell you anyway, you can do hard things, and you are strong and resilient and very, very brave. And I just know it in my heart. You mentioned Flo in a community like this. You were talking about people living with mental health challenges. Can you talk about what it's like to live with mental health challenges in a community like this? In a small area in Rwanda. What is it like? What are some of the prevailing views? And the last part of that question is, have you noticed a change, even if it's very small, in how people view people living with mental illness?
Yeah, so I would say I would have to compare from when I wrote my essay in 2023 and now. So I would say there's probably been a change, however small. But coming back to the first part of the question, how, in a community like this. So what is a community like this? An African community where mental health issues are seen as, you're crazy, or you're gonna be a volatile person, or you're gonna be a violent person, or you're going to be someone who cannot, take care of themselves, or be valuable in any kind of way, because of the culture that is really deeply ingrained in people, that is very hard to change. But also as new generations of people come up, millennials, Gen Z, people who are consuming the internet more, seeing how maybe people from other countries express themselves. And also even the effort of really the Ministry of Health here and other, people in position to like drive that change, to really educate people, to really put things out there, to really try to, drive it home. Like mental health is this, mental health is not this. Having issues does not stop you from being a contributing member of society. Trying to break stigma and stuff like that. And yeah, so I would say that there is some change. It's harder to drive that change in older generations. Younger people are more likely to be willing to see this issue differently and to learn more. And another factor to that sort of makes the situation of Rwanda unique is, our history of the genocide, the 1994 Tutsi genocide. That is something that just there is no way to deny mental health issues when it comes to stuff like that, to survivors, children of survivors, and all of the other issues that are related to the genocide, because of the way heinous genocide is, and how it's been. I was born during the genocide, so it's been 31 years since I was born, and it's been 31 years since the genocide happened, and it feels as fresh as ever. It's just that one thing where, from the outside, you may, think about genocide and even other genocides that has happened in, other countries, and think of them as, it's been these many years and stuff. But there is, the trauma from the people who experienced it, their children, and, it's something that just really gets ingrained in people. But then there is that was one part where I would say the community would understand that, some people had PTSD or
Mhm.
depression or, stuff from that. But then, what about mental health issues from other aspects of life? From, losing a child, from being overwhelmed from at work, from losing an important relationship or struggling with extreme poverty and stuff. And so I think there is a part that they understand. There's a part that is easier to understand because you're like, this is something horrible that happened to people, and we can understand that. But at the same time, we don't understand why you're having all these crises because your boyfriend broke up with you,
Right.
or
Right.
because of this and that. So that is where most of the efforts are being put on to just really try to understand, what depression is, what anxiety is, bipolar, all these things, and also really seeing them as diseases and not seeing them as personal failures from people who are not as resilient, where they're like, in this situation we can understand it, but in this situation it's not valid. Yeah, so I think that is what I can say about that.
And it's fascinating to hear you talk about that, and it reminds me of how people can have empathy for something that they can see, like a physical illness, or oh, you got your leg amputated. I can see that. I can see that you have one leg, and I can feel something because it's so in my face. It's so obvious. The way that you were talking about genocide, it's like, oh, of course we can understand trauma and PTSD related to that. But it can be so easy to then minimize other things, um, which are all still valid. And,
Yeah.
but I guess there is that tendency to negate or say, well, yeah, but it's not this. But that's the thing about mental health is it's not the suffering Olympics, and one person's experience doesn't negate another person's experience. It's all valid. So thank you for pointing that out. And I think this is a good time actually to get into the Wayback Machine and go to your essay, um, which was published a number of years ago on the site, and it's how you first came to us. Um, and just full disclosure, like this was written a long time ago. I think you were 23, you said.
Yeah.
And now you're 31, and some thoughts and opinions and feelings may have changed, and we're going to talk about that when you're finished reading it. But it is such a beautiful essay, and an essay is a snapshot in time, and so we're going to go back to that time, playing hide and seek with a demon. My struggle with anxiety. Take it away, Flo, when you're ready.
Yeah. Oh, so do you want me to like read the whole thing and then you will like stop me, or just read and
You can just read the whole thing, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit.
yeah, so playing hide and seek with a demon, my struggle with anxiety. I don't know when it started. It was not as though I suddenly woke up with a raging heartbeat and butterflies in my stomach, wishing I could run away from myself. It came in tiny bits of worry. I felt confused by this set of emotions, but I thought it would go away. Of course, the feelings did not end, and I knew I wasn't supposed to feel this way. I wanted to understand where the feelings were coming from, but I didn't. I couldn't bring myself to investigate them. Thus, I experienced many years of wrestling with an unknown demon, anxiety. Sometimes during dinner with the family, a simple thought crossing my mind would send my heart on a crazy ride. This was before my anxiety started to have direct triggers. Eventually, I recognized that my anxiety was attached to specific situations, like socializing. My energy was consumed by trying to stop my anxiety. I'd hold my breath and give myself a pep talk inside my mind. You are worried about something that no one else is worried about. Worrying isn't going to help you. You will be just fine. Breathe, say a prayer, and it will go away. I thought I could fix my problems by just snapping out of these modes of thinking. In reality, this just made the attacks worse. I couldn't sleep. I thought it was insomnia. Doctors asked me what I thought about while lying awake at night, and I said nothing. Truthfully, I was worried for my life, but I could not put these fears to words. I lay awake thinking that one day I would not be able to wake up and face the day. I lay awake thinking about how strange it was that I couldn't sleep while everyone else could. I thought, I am failing. I don't have what it takes to be here on earth. But I couldn't speak these thoughts aloud to the doctors. My anxiety made it so that I could not even close my eyes and rest. I tossed and turned and wished to see the morning come so the scary sounds of the night would be replaced by people. Social situations made me anxious, yes, but when I could get myself to go to class or chat with a neighbor, it was such a relief to exist for a little while in a world that had more characters other than me and where I wasn't alone with my demons. My whole life became worry. I felt scared to talk to people, scared to go to church, scared to go to parties, scared of visitors showing up at the house, things that used to bring me solace. I didn't want to be part of any aspect of my life. It all felt so unsafe. I anticipated worst-case scenarios, embarrassing myself at a party, falling in front of everyone. In the morning on a Sunday, I would tell myself that I would go to church. In the evening, I say to myself that I would go no matter what. And as the clock neared 4 p.m., I was consumed by thoughts that there was something out there, even though I couldn't name it. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I started medical school, and my anxiety progressed to new heights. I remember my alarm going off around at 4 p.m. I had set it to wake up and study for my test. When it went off, I felt as though I had been paralyzed in my bed. My anxiety told me I could never pass my test. I couldn't even bring myself to study because my anxiety told me I would fail, no matter what. My fears became so firm that I believed them as concrete facts. These days were long and full of tasks to accomplish. I was so tired, yet when I tried to sleep, my heart would beat like a drum that wanted to rip my chest in two. Worry brought more worry, and I was getting scared of my emotional state. I was a stranger in my body. I had no coping methods. I couldn't talk to anyone about what happened. When I told the doctor that, it felt as though my heart was racing. He did a test, but found that nothing was wrong. He told me to go home and relax. I couldn't bring myself to confide in anyone. I was afraid of being judged. I was afraid no one would be able to understand what I was going through. It all felt too complicated and impossible to explain to anyone else. I was convinced there was no way that I could be helped. When I finally let go, I learned to listen to another voice other than the voice of my anxiety. This was the voice of a friend. I had reached out to her online, and though I didn't know it at the time, she happened to be a therapist. I confided in her, and surprisingly, she didn't tell me to get over it. She told me that it wasn't my fault, that I didn't deserve to feel this way. She said there was a way to make things get better. I kept talking with her and tried to do some of the things she suggested, like being kinder to myself, exercising, and writing. Her ideas helped me some, but she urged me to find a therapist in Rwanda to talk to. Mental health resources are very limited in my country. After a long search, I found a therapist with whom I felt comfortable. In Rwanda, we don't talk about mental health. It's taboo. Our culture condemns those who dare to feel or to say what they feel. When I started going to the hospital to meet with my therapist, I was certain that if I ran into anyone I knew, they would think I had lost my mind, that I had become the illness, and that there was no me after that. I couldn't tell anyone that I was speaking with someone to help fix my mind. Being a person with mental illness is incredibly shameful in my community. It isn't recognized as a health issue and doesn't get the same acknowledgement that a disease like malaria receives. No matter how debilitating mental illness can be, our traditions and culture teach strength and resilience. And mental illness is seen as a contradiction to this, a flaw or defect, something shameful to be hidden. Mental illness is a reality the African culture repeatedly rejects. Thus, going to meet with my therapist was incredibly difficult. However, I recognized I had to find help or I may lose my life completely. Something inside of me chose life, no matter what it would take. Where that strength came from, I didn't know. My first days of therapy were more traumatic than healing. I knew that my therapist was there to help me and wasn't going to judge me, but in talking with her, I felt like there was a spotlight on my shame and the mess my life was. Therapy made me visit ugly places I had checked out of and intentionally disconnected from. I was terrified to replay sins of an abusive childhood and several toxic relationships. It took a few sessions for me to feel as though I was healing instead of moving towards self-destruction. I was reminded that it wasn't my fault that I felt the way that I did and that I was strong to choose to fight. My therapist approached therapy from a cognitive behavioral therapy point of view, something I had never heard of before. This meant that I had to be aware of my thoughts and write them in a notebook. My therapist explained that anxiety was always a result of thoughts. The thoughts acted as triggers. The consequences were fear. I was beginning to train my brain to be aware of this. I would challenge myself to look at the thoughts from a different perspective and decide if they were rational or not. It helps to take a rational mode and not let my anxiety dictate the way I process things. Entrusting someone with my past, with my shame and anxiety, with the childhood traumas I had suppressed was something I longed for but never expected to receive. My therapist helped me to find this. The idea of medication was something I wanted to avoid. I thought it was going to change me, that I may lose track of myself. Through much convincing, my therapist started to work with the neuropsychiatric hospital to choose the right course of medication for me. I was warned that it would take about 6 weeks for me to adjust to my medication, and it would get worse before it got better. And it did get worse, so much worse. It was a complete nightmare. It was a complete nightmare for 6 weeks. I could hardly function. I would jump at any sound. I dreaded the night. I dreaded the nighttime with the fear that people would bring into my house, rob, and rape me. I was frozen in fear and helpless. I wanted to die. I had thought I had to fight through the worst of my anxiety to get to the other side. My friend, whose idea it was for me to start treatment, was my main support system. My therapist also listened to my concerns. She talked to the hospital about adjusting my doses until my body was ready. They both promised over and over when I wanted to give up that it was going to get better. And then after rain came sunshine. My body got used to my SSRI medication, and suddenly life felt like life again. A few weeks into the medication helping to bring me strength, I signed up for a youth conference, and once it wasn't difficult for me to get out of bed and attend something, I was able to show up, be myself, and participate. I talked to a lot of strangers and reconnected with parts of myself I thought I had forever lost to anxiety. I didn't have to question my speech 1,000 times before saying something. It felt incredibly easy to be myself. I became confident. I looked forward to each day when I woke up, ready to take risks and be myself. I reconnected with the me that I knew was deep inside. I could hardly believe I was still there. It's been 2 years after that high and that moment of extreme positivity. The medication I was taking that had been working so well for me became unavailable in my country. And I tried alternatives, experiencing many highs and lows of other medications, dealing with side effects and resistance, and trying to handle the cost of medication and therapy. Eventually, I exhausted the alternative which were available for me and tried the healing process without medication. While I am not living the high and the beautiful sunshine of when my body got used to my old medication, I am far from the girl I used to be. Yes, I still have days when I am overwhelmed and frozen in fear. Sometimes I feel again that a stranger is living inside of me. But I also have days when I talk to my fears and I listen. Just last week, I was trying to get my head around the fact that the hectic part of my semester is approaching. My anxiety hit as I was packing to go. I felt so far out of touch with my studies. Anxiety yelled that I wasn't like the others, that I was sick and weak and sleep deprived. I firmly say to myself, I have done this for 4 years now and I can do this. I am sick, but I've got this, and all you ever tell me is lies. I no longer let anxiety stop me from living the experiences of this life. I take chances and I dream. I know I am never going to go back to where I used to live. There is no easy or instant fix for mental illnesses, including anxiety. Healing is a journey and a choice one makes every day. Sometimes you're going to try a million different things before something works for you. Sometimes something is going to help you at first try. The most important thing is don't give up. Reach out. You cannot make it on your own. And letting yourself be helped is not shameful. It is strength, a powerful way to fight. Oh, and that's the end.
Wow, that is the end. And what a powerful, affirming, hopeful end. Flo, thank you so much for writing that. and for sharing that with our community and for starting this long relationship with this piece. This is how it all began.
Yeah.
What is it like for you to go back to this after so many years?
It's beautiful and shocking in a way, because I'm reading it and I'm relating to it. And then I'm also in awe of that voice, knowing what I know now and knowing, what would happen in my life for the years to follow. Um, and, one of the things that um, that hit me was, how I was talking about medication and how hard it was to access. And that was before COVID, because
Yep.
in 2019, COVID started, and none of the medications that I was taking, none of it is manufactured in even Africa to begin with. And, flights from Europe or, from all the places where the medications that I was taking was being manufactured, everything was disrupted. And for several months during COVID, I went, without. I just couldn't find my medication anywhere. And, which is something that I know that people even to this day, even post-COVID, struggle with. There's like a limited, list of medications here. And then there is a limited list of medication that your insurance will pay for. And then there was a list of limited, maybe the medication is available, but it is just so much money. I remember how I used to feel. At some point, I felt very, very guilty about the price of my antidepressant. I was like, how do I buy medication with this amount of money? And at that time, a friend was helping me to pay for that. But then I was like, there is somebody who is making this amount a month to take care of a family of 5 in my country. And there was a part of me that felt really like, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve to be spending this much money on medication and stuff. And I had to learn to believe that it was worth it. And it wasn't easy. So recognizing that, and also, I don't know, just it made me, nostalgic of, that person. Like I was young, I had gone through stuff, but it was also full of hope. But I'm also excited about the hope that I have, especially towards the end, that comes with having answers. To this day, I'm sure that there are probably people who are having symptoms of anxiety and going to the doctor being like, my heart is racing, and nobody figuring out that that could be anxiety because of how that is not even in like your GP's vocabulary. Like they just they don't even consider it. And I just like I have hope. I have hope for my community, for my country, because I don't know, I have just learned a lot of things since that essay about myself and about mental health and about hope. But I also sort of, miss that young person. Yeah.
She's still there, Flo. She's still in there. And I mean, you're 31, girl. You are
Yeah.
still that young person. I'll tell you, as someone who has a number of years on you, I won't say how many, but
Yeah.
she's still in there. And I just want to say that, earlier we were talking about perspectives about mental health in Rwanda, and you were talking about younger people, Gen Z and millennials coming along with new ideas, different ideas, better ideas, more openness. You're part of that change. I hope you understand that and know that and believe that. Through the essay that you've written, through the film. P.S. Let's not forget about that. You made a film while you were in Cape Cod, while you were in
Cape
Cape May,
May.
at the Women's Writers Retreat. This podcast, your work, your advocacy, your voice, that's part of what's moving the needle. When someone Googles depression, anxiety, Rwanda, your essay is coming up. And you are helping people through your perspectives and through your recovery and your story. So I hope that you understand that and appreciate that and believe that, because I do. And I see it and I know it. And you just deserve so much credit. I think there are so many people going through what you're going through who don't step forward in a public way. And that's okay. Like, that's their choice. But you made a different choice, and I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think the me who wrote that essay was scared, but also brave. Because I would think that I probably wouldn't have as much fear talking about that today as I did then, even if I still chose to, write this essay. And I also don't have as much fear at the thought of, someone Googling me and, they see that. One of the important things is, just like you were talking about, this generation, some of the ways in which I found, resources was just to Google people to, try to find resources. And there are more centers now in the country. And another aspect that is probably specific to me is that, I'm work in healthcare, and so I'm a doctor, and somehow there are people who are holding me in high regard. And then me coming out and being like, I'm struggling with this and this. I still wonder if, I don't know. I don't know if I have the answer to that. I wonder if I have a fear maybe in me that wonders if there are people just having a fear of being like, if somebody Googles this, are they going to think that I'm not fit for my job because of this? Which to me is, what's harmful is lots of people who will never go to anywhere near a psychiatric hospital or a therapist office because they're a minister or because they're, head of a certain hospital or because they're in the parliament, stuff like that. And that's not what's shameful. What's shameful is maybe, well, not shameful, but having a problem is not shameful. And taking care of them is not shameful. It's brave. It's a responsible thing. And it's something that, people should take pride in. My
Absolutely.
therapist,
And I would
yeah,
want a doctor who is having issues and does something about it, not
yeah,
someone who's struggling with something and denying it and pushing it aside and pushing it down and repressing it and coming to work all, messed up because they're not getting help. Um,
yeah,
I want a world where our professionals, our teachers, our law enforcement, our physicians, our nurses are struggling with real life things and are doing something about it and
yeah,
not just pretending, oh, I don't have anything. I'm perfect. Look at me. I'm robot doctor and nothing bothers me. Bullshit. it's 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 absolute bullshit. So I want a world where people are honest about what they're going through and getting help. I would much rather that. And that's the example that you're setting. And if there are people out there who are too narrow-minded or ignorant or stupid to understand that, and to put it in another way, let's say you had raging diabetes, but you weren't controlling your blood sugar, you weren't taking insulin, you were denying that you had
yeah.
diabetes, but you have it. But well, I'm just not going to do anything about it. It's absurd. So why would we want people who operate the same way about their mental health? We all have mental health issues, so just deal with them. Um, that's that's the example I would want set, and that's the example I think you're showing to other people.
Yes. And at some point, I understand, maneuvering through a community like mine. For example, my psychiatrist had an office at a neuropsychiatric hospital. But there were people who would reach out to her and be like, I am someone who is important. Maybe I'm the CEO of something or this and that. And I want to look for help, but I will not set foot into a psychiatric
Hmm.
hospital. And she would see them at her home. And she is also careful about where she lives. She wants it to be, as discreet as possible, which I believe, the right to privacy and also the journey of where people are at, because some people will, take a little while to not be as ashamed or
Sure.
understand. Yeah. But also I think people are making these decisions because it has happened before, where if somebody knows you're going to, a psychiatric hospital for, I don't know, whatever, then your boss is going to conclude that you can't do your job. Or,
Hmm.
people are going to whisper, or people are going to tell your fiance that you're crazy and it's
Yeah.
not responsible to marry into that family. Even if it's not you, they'd be like, that person's dad was hospitalized at the
Sure.
mental hospital at some point. Stuff like that. So there's still a lot of work. And I just really have a lot of hope for my country. I really hope that things can continue to move in a positive direction and that conversations keep happening until people are really radically changed.
Conversations like this one. And thank you so much for joining me and for having this. And I'm going to end this with your words. You cannot make it on your own, and letting yourself be helped is not shameful. It is strength, a powerful way to fight. Flo, thank you so much for being with me on Recovery Diaries in Depth.
You're welcome. I don't know, like I'm very, very thankful for this conversation and for getting to speak with you again, and for really just, thinking about these things and also talking about these things from a perspective of, someone from a country like Rwanda and also other countries in sub-Saharan Africa where the culture is pretty much the same. So thank you very much for having me and for continuing this relationship with the writers. I was very, very excited to be part of this.
It's a joy. I'm wishing you all the best. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you again for joining us in conversation today. It's beautiful to see the progression of our contributors.
We are so grateful to Dr. Florence Mukangenzi from Rwanda for spending some time with us here on Recovery Diaries in Depth. You can find her essay, Playing Hide and Seek with a Demon, My Struggle with Anxiety, on our website. And you can also find a short documentary film we made about Florence's struggle with her mental illness in Rwanda on our YouTube channel.
Before we leave you, we want to remind you to check out our website, recoverydiaries.org. There, like this podcast, you'll find additional stories, videos, and content about mental health, empowerment, and change. We look forward to continuing to grow our community. Thank you so much for being a part of it. We wouldn't be here without you. Be sure to join our mailing list so you never miss a podcast episode, essay, or film. I'm Gabe Nathan. Until next time, take good care.